Again every Thursday
Hello.
to talk about transitioning of humanitarians in different ways. And this time we have the honor to talk to Marta, and she will introduce herself and her experience of how her transition is going and what the experience like. So, Marta, we will request you to start the intro, and then we will start with the first questions, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity. So my name is Marta. I was born in Portugal, and I have quite some years of experience as a humanitarian professional. And 3 years ago, I decided to switch, to go through a career change and to become a consultant based in Lebanon, but working on Yemen related issues. So I've been now based in Beirut for almost 3 years.
Mhm.
Um, and the transition continues. So who knows
Yeah,
what's next? Yes,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that's brief, more and
Mm-hmm.
less. I guess academically, I was more engaged in studies that had to do with international law or international organizations, international relations. So I think that explains more or less the first professional choices I made in my life. But then the professional experience I had allowed me then to choose, to have more freedom in choosing
Mm-hmm.
what I want to transition to. I think that
Yeah,
was very
yeah.
important.
Thank you and welcome, Marta. I'm very happy that we have you here. It's really an honor. It's a pleasure to have you here on our live session. And I would be really curious to understand what were your reasons for changing for you talked about having more freedom. That's so clearly I'm hearing that you needed more freedom in your professional and maybe private life. What were maybe other reasons that you decided, okay, well, I've had this humanitarian experience and that's great. I want to work. I want to be a consultant.
Yes, thank you, Vicky. I think it was a very cumulative experience. I worked for almost 10 years with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Initially, the context was gradually they became what we call more and more volatile, so places, hardship missions, as they are known. And I think after the last one, which was in Syria, I thought in any case, with a transition or without, it was a good time
Yeah.
to have a good break and really to gain some perspective. Thinking always I would go back to the institution, but then that break led me to ask myself, I guess, many questions about what I wanted to do and dreams that I still had with regards my future jobs, but also on a more personal level, things that I always wanted to do. And I think after 9 months, I thought that perhaps what I really wanted, and what I was really looking forward to was a career change, a career switch, and not so much of a break. But I think the accumulation was very important. I felt I had spent a good number of years with the organization. I was very happy with it. I knew it very well. Um, but I wanted to try something new, because I'm also very curious as a person, and I wanted to stay in the Middle East and to go a little bit more in depth into certain topics that I had only been somehow superficially exposed to. I wanted to go in depth and not so much in breadth. So that's what led me mainly to do the transition.
Amazing. Marta, one other thing that I think often comes up that I heard people say is that if you become a consultant, how flexible are you really? Versus some people tell me that it's a job where it becomes so intense at times and then free at other times, kind of like seasonal or staginal or whatever the way you call it, right? So I'm
Mm.
interested, how would you describe your way of working, where how much you are in charge of being flexible versus also working? What would you say?
Yes, thank you. That's a really great question. I think in the beginning, Asel, I had no idea. It was my first experience as a consultant. It was
Yeah.
very strange because I was used to go to an office, to have
Yes.
working hours, to have lunch breaks or not. I mean, it depends, but normally with
Yeah.
lunch, normally with an end of the day. So to be in Beirut, to be here as a consultant, was very strange to find those routines. And I think I looked for a lot of inspiration from colleagues who had decided to also to become consultants. And I guess I reached out and asked them, how do you organize yourselves? How do you organize your time? I think
Yeah.
that's very important, because as a consultant, you're expected, you work on deliverables and deadlines. So somehow you need to bring organization, and it's very easy
Yeah.
to lose that organization because you are your employer.
Yeah.
So I think in the beginning it was trial and error. I was trying to understand, do I work better in the mornings or afternoons, in a cafe or at home, um, in a library? The space was a big, let's say, something that took quite a lot of my time to figure out.
Yeah.
That was a very important first thing. And then as you grow more comfortable, you start getting a knack at organizing time versus deliverables versus your personal life as well, and your me time and your friends. And then I think as a consultant, it's never a very clear road. There will be peaks where you have a lot of
Yeah.
work, which is why I think managing and keeping yourself at a steady pace as opposed to going at a super fast pace is very important.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, you will be always expected somehow to deliver. So you have to, to make sure that you have your batteries and reserves in shape for that. And that requires a lot of, let's say, self-management skills, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning it. It's you're pointing at a very important subject, while for many humanitarians that we work in structures. As the humanitarian setting is very, very structured, like your whole life is structured, right? As you mentioned, not only your working hours and lunch breaks, but your R&Rs, your holidays,
Exactly.
your thinking, everything is very structured. So I'm hearing really the challenge, and really the stepping out of your comfort zone and going forward into defining these structures, like what is it that is going to work for me. And as you mentioned, you are your own employer, you are your own boss, you're everything for yourself. So there is a lot of freedom, and as they say, there is also a lot of challenge in a lot of the freedom. I would like to ask you, Marta. What was any this is the challenge that you mentioned. How did you handle this challenge? Who helped you, or what helped you?
I think my career, my previous experience helped a lot because I had some managerial experience with the ICRC, which was very helpful to start with. And then I think I've always been one to reach out to peers, to ask for
Yeah.
advice, to, if there are no communities in place, to try to establish them, or to try to get that kind of mentorship or
Yeah.
peer-to-peer kind of relationship. That was very important. So I asked for a lot of advice. I sent a lot of emails and asked my colleagues and peers, even those who are not consultants, how did you do it? Because it can be very disorientating in the beginning.
Yeah.
You really don't know. And I think thinking also that some things we take for granted when we work for an institution, and in the ICRC we had regularly appraisals that made sure that we were on track, that we were achieving, that we were, as managers, we were also had the right kind of skill set to address things at work. I think, yeah, there was quite a number of challenges. But again, I think what we have today in terms of knowledge in this area is a lot more than in the past. So there's also literature that one can resort to, read. And I think not only was I lucky with my peers, but also not, I was never one of not feeling scared of reaching out and saying, help
Yeah.
me. So I've always taken that first step, and I always got very positive reactions from colleagues and peers, which I think usually happens when you ask for help and advice. People are
Yeah.
usually very receptive to that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Martha, one of the things that got me thinking was that when I resigned from my job before, one of the things I realized that my mindset was working. I need to work from 9 to 6 as usual from Monday to Friday. And if I don't do it, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing the right thing, or I will not feed myself, or this kind of things. And then I realized that there was a lot of this drama around, in order to create success or whatever the version of it, I need to have this XYZ. And if I don't, then I'm not making it happen. Right. So I worked on that mindset. And the other one was extreme of, okay, now I don't need to work at all. And then I will just, travel around and do all the great things, and then realizing, oh no, maybe I should be working on that. So I understand when you're saying that you need to, find your own balance of where that is and get better at it by exploring. So mine was like going from one extreme to another. And what I would love to ask, Marta, your reflections on how you dealt with uncertainty, because I think this is one of the things that many humanitarians um, fear. I mean, rightly so, right? Because our brains love stability, structure sometimes, or a certain level of certainty so that we don't get mad, obviously. And how one works around uncertainties that I'm assuming consultant work brings, just like coaching work as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested how you worked around it.
I'm still learning.
Mm.
Every not every day, but let's say every month or every contract extension or consultancy extension is an opportunity to look back and reflect upon that question. I think I said what I try to do, because it's very unclear sometimes whether that consultancy will be extended or not,
Mhm.
or whether it will become something else, or whether it will come to an end. And I think as consultants, we are always scared that we don't know if that gap that comes after consultancy, it's 1 month or 1 year. So I
Mhm.
think in many situations that leads us to say yes to everything,
Yeah.
which may not be very smart,
Mhm.
because it's not an informed choice. We are taking that decision because, um, and I'm also living in Lebanon now, where it has been extremely difficult in the last 3 years in terms of the economic and social and political situation. So I think that makes us almost without reflecting say, yeah, yeah, sure, yes.
Mhm.
But I think with after almost 3 years as a consultant, I now take a little step back and I
Mhm.
say, can I come back to you, and
Yeah.
can I have a few days to reflect
Yeah.
upon this? Um, I think that's very important, because there's also the risk that you become overwhelmed. Because if you do well in a consultancy, you're creating a hook for another one and another one, and then somehow you become known in your field. So other organizations may come to you, they also want to work with you. So you're really, in the beginning, you're like, oh, okay, this is good. So you start saying yes to everything. But I think that that can be also counterproductive, because then you lose your capacity to manage, which is what is really at the nature of being a consultant. A consultant is a self-manager. That's the most important thing, more than the deliverables. I think it's really your ability to set boundaries, be reasonable, have very reasonable expectations, because it's not only the work, it's your personal life and so many other parts of one's life. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So one thing that I just wanted to quickly share, maybe for anyone who finds it helpful, is that in my experience, the way that I dealt with uncertainty is by just reminding myself that the reason why I chose to work as a coach is because I wanted to do only the things I love doing. I know it may sound very arrogant to some people, but that's absolutely not nothing to do with it. It's more like the desire to be doing things just because you love doing this way. And it may have the downside of maybe sometimes not earning the way you want to, but always reminding what's the important part, why you decided to do this. Like in your case, Marta, it seems like a freedom, flexibility,
Yes.
and wanting to be doing it because you want to do that way, right? So that's why I love that we can always deal with uncertainty around what was important, why we chose that road, instead of being very reactionary and start saying yes to every opportunity, which always appears as long as you trust that it will come your way, as long as you are staying true your course. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, and I think also it's very interesting because ever since I became a consultant, it's normal. You start meeting more people like you,
yeah,
and you also meet many non-consultants. You also meet many professionals who are um, not more undefined, but are much more relaxed. Um,
mm,
I think there's a variety of professional engagement today that I hadn't seen when I was in an organization, which
Yeah.
makes sense. I understand I was very contained somehow, but to
Mhm.
have this exposure to different ways of working,
Mhm.
me with my routines and
Mhm.
goals and timetables and schedules. But then it was great to meet people who work completely differently because I found that also reassuring. I think and this is what also took me to this decision was not to feel constrained by anything. I also don't want to feel
yeah,
constrained as a consultant. I think I want to explore ways
Yeah.
of working that blend in with my nature. So it's
yeah.
also a self-discovery journey, I guess. But it's been
Mhm.
great. Um, those little window openings and meeting professionals who are completely dealing with things in a completely different manner. I find it very.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm hearing you when you're speaking about diversity, and I think we actually had this discussion once that once you leave the organization you were working for, there is suddenly a diversity of people you are meeting, and of course, it's wider than what we used to be meeting, and maybe it's just different kinds of people, or we haven't been exposed, so there is so much learning, so much discovery, and I had also this experience. I find it interesting listening to you both, your experiences about finding a balance, going from one extreme a little bit to another. Like I work too much and I always say yes, and then or I enjoy and don't do anything. I personally didn't have that. Somehow, I attribute it to the fact that I
Mhm.
returned back home and I feel such a strong sense of
Mhm,
stability and anchor that I simply didn't have these feelings. But I
mhm,
just wanted to point out at the perspectives and different perspectives, because my perspective was I just have so much freedom and I can do whatever I want, and I'm secure. So again, I just want to point out that there are so many different ways that you that people when transitioning they can feel, and they can depending on where they go, or depending on what kind of a lifestyle they choose. But I like what you say, that really you need to be able to set some sort of framework for yourself to be able to say, I work from here to there, and not being afraid to say, okay, well, let me think about it, and not always say
Mhm.
yes, but let me think about it. Marta, because you're the first consultant that we have that is sort of a freelance, working on a freelance basis, I would like to ask you, for people who are watching, for for humanitarian, not only ICRC, but for all people
Mhm.
from other aid agencies, aid professionals who are really interested in your story and who are inspired to become consultants. What would be three things that you would advise them, that you say, you know what, have these three things? And I'm sure there would be so many different things you could tell them, but really, if you could tell them three most important things, what would you advise them that they should keep in mind before they decide, and when they are transitioning?
Yes, I think the first one is don't be afraid. I mean,
Mhm.
it's great. You're learning, you're getting out of your comfort zone. That's very important because I think when one works for many years with an organization, sometimes we get a feeling we hit a ceiling. We are evolving. Yes, we're getting missions. Yes, we are being deployed to contexts, and maybe we are even getting promoted, but we still feel somehow that we are stuck. And I think it's very important to just embrace that the adventure, the calling. Um, it's 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 not. I always think it's not going to be as bad as one think it is going to be, and probably also not as good as one think it's going to be. It's not wonderful. It's always something in between, but ultimately, it's mainly what you make out of it. So it's an attitude, I think. as a first, let's say, kind of lesson learned. The second one is, have a backup plan. I think
Mm-hmm.
plan a little bit, be a bit strategic. We were talking before about some digital nomads. I know a few. We have to have a plan just in case that next or the extension is not coming, savings or something on the side that will give us a few thousands that can hold us on for a few other
Yeah.
months. That's really important. I
Mm-hmm.
think so. And then I think the third one is really pace yourself, because if you do well, work will keep coming and you will
Yeah.
need to pace yourself to manage yourself well.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, it's been also very beautiful because in the pacing, I've also reached out to people to kind of start working together with them as
Mm-hmm.
consultants. So, like a confederation of consultants almost. But it's great
Yeah.
because you start meeting the professionals in the area, you start also choosing people that you want to. It's more than a co-worker relationship. When two consultants work together, there's something
Mm-hmm.
unique to that relationship. I can't explain it, but it's beautiful too because you need help. I mean, you cannot do it all alone. If you decide to continue being a consultant in a specific area, which is my case, I want to continue working in this area. I'm not interested in changing the
Mm-hmm.
focus of work, but I want to work with people and not on my own. I think that's
Yeah.
also something very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Marta, I think one of the things that I love about what you said is that oftentimes people say, I want to work with teams, but also I want to have certain flexibility. And how do I combine those passions, right? And I think consultant seems to allow you to do that, even though I always thought of consultant being like a very solo type of work. But
Mm,
you are sharing the insight that it's actually not the case, which I love to hear that. So that's
Yeah.
why in my head, the way that I'm thinking is like if you love managing your own time, your own mind, your own schedule, and your own way of working, and then doing that with other people, that sounds amazing opportunity for you to do that. With all of its also sides that are challenging, but then we have the same challenges in our work life, right? So it's
true.
not like oftentimes we get, I think, into this idea that just because it's uncertain, it means it's very scary and you're not going to make it. But it's also scary and difficult in the work that we are employed by. That also happens. So that's why it's really how we manage those challenges and how we manage our mind while doing that work. So that's why, Marta, amazing that you share that insight. So,
Mm.
as a wrapping up, maybe Marta, you can share with people who I think oftentimes the question begins also like in addition to what Vicky was saying is like where do you start? Like if you decide that you decided to become a consultant and you have a long experience, so where do you do the next step? I guess what was for you useful to say, okay, I want to do this, this is my next step, what would you say?
Yes. In my case, I had a good idea of what I wanted to do in terms of
Mm,
area of work that I wanted to focus on, which was in my case, it's transitional justice. And then
Mm-hmm.
mm,
I started reaching out to peers. I
Yeah.
started emailing. I started calling them. I started asking. It's a very humbling experience because we get used throughout our professional lives when you work for an institution to have those come to you almost
yeah,
naturally, but to the other way around, perhaps
Yeah.
awkward in the beginning, but maybe I think it's more in our heads than anything else. So
yeah,
this is what I did for months, and then surprisingly something came up. I was not even expecting it
Mm-hmm.
to be what I'm doing now, and I said, well, sure. I'll apply. I'll see if it goes well, and then it just I think it showed me that everything is really organic. It starts with an
yes,
Yeah.
email that leads to, oh, by the way, a colleague of mine is looking for, are you interested? And you say yes, and then you apply, and then you have an
Mm-hmm.
interview. and then you meet the friend who sent you the consultancy, advertisement. You meet her for coffee, and then it's organic.
Yeah.
It's evolving. That's the most beautiful thing. So you need to start. I think, yeah, things then evolve on their own, but that first step needs to come from you
Yeah,
ultimately.
amazing. And what I love about also is that, sometimes all it takes is for us to just be loving to do what we want to be doing, and then everything somehow comes together. I know through bumps, but still it comes together. So that's why
Yeah,
I love your story that you start somewhere and then it will lead you to what you want. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's the beauty
Yeah.
of a simple question. How are
Yeah.
you? I want to do this. Have you heard? It's
yeah.
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
designedly simple, but very
Hmm.
inspiring. I found.
Yeah. And for me, what it also brings up is really sort of the timeline. We know that a lot of aid workers or aid professionals would say, okay, well, I work now, so once I get the time off or at certain limit, I will start looking for and I will. But
Mm,
actually, as you say, as you confirm, you start now. You start just as
Exactly.
talking to someone, to your friend, and you can still be employed and you haven't changed yet, and that's okay. But just start with one email, one question, and then it will start growing, as you say, in organic way. So you don't have to wait for anything. You can start the discussion today. That's what really is, I believe, a very nice confirmation from you. Yeah.
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely, for sure.
and
And
also, one thing, maybe just sorry if I interrupted, Marta, is
mhm,
just for me, what was helpful is to always know that we have the answers. It's just maybe we're afraid of owning the answers, looking at the answers, because we're searching for a proof somewhere else that something is working and successful. And then we start doing it. But actually, everyone's journey, as you can see, is very unique. So that's why, our journey may not reflect your journey, but you may have
mm,
the answer to go after already. It's just that
yes,
you might be afraid, and therefore you're not making the first step. So
yeah,
I think what Diki was saying beautifully is just start getting curious now, even if you don't change anything external, and then see
true.
where it takes you, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think I always use this expression when I speak to people want to do or want to follow similar steps. One has to grow intimate with fear because there's a lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty,
Yeah.
right? And that's part two. It's not so much part of your professional journey, but it's also a spiritual journey where you foster that kind of intimacy. You let go a bit of this obsession with monthly salaries and pay slips and knowing what you're going to do for the rest of your life, which was my parents' generation, and I don't judge them.
Yeah.
I think we are in a much more volatile one, and we need really to embrace, to grow intimate with fear and uncertainty because
Yeah.
that's how things are currently. So better go with the flow than to fight against it, I guess.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah. And also, I think what I love about uncertainty is that it always holds your biggest growth.
Yeah.
Yes,
While
true.
when you are in certainty, you know how you will grow. But if it's
Yeah.
uncertain, you never know how you will grow, but you will be growing already by being there. So that's
Yeah.
why, Marta, what you said is like poetically beautiful.
Yeah.
Vicky, anything you'd like to add before
No,
we
thank
wrap
you.
up?
It's a really great talking to you. And just maybe one, as I love what you said, that we don't know how we grow. And I just wanted to add is that in uncertainty we can grow exponentially,
Yes.
whereby in certainty, when we are in certainty, we grow really pace by pace and we know the pace. So thank you very much. Thank you, Marta. I'm really
Thank
very happy that
you so much.
you came
Pleasure.
and talked to us about transitioning from professional aid work to consultancy. I think it's going to be really inspiring for so many people, because I know that there are loads of people who would like to go into consultancy, but they don't know how. They are fearful and they have lots of questions. So thank you for that, and thank you, Asel, for really for being our standing invitee.
Thank you so much. Great.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everyone. And Marta, we wish you, of course, best of luck and lots of growth in this fear and uncertainty world. And it's, maybe one day we will be writing those books about
Yeah.
how to behave in those times when everyone else is searching for certainty. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why. Thank you so much. And we
Thank
will
Thank
you.
you.
continue this conversations every Thursday with
Mhm.
my fellow coach, Vicky. Until then, stay safe and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.